All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the Life Work Podcast. Again, my name is Wendy Kay, and today I have the honor of having Kevin Bush here on the podcast. Kevin Bush is a leadership coach, consultant. Sometimes I even refer to him as the EQ or emotional intelligence guru. He'll tell us all about that. The title of this podcast, of this episode, is part of what I'm calling the chaos series. So there is chaos right now. We're in a pandemic. So I'm thinking about all the things that I could talk about, all the things that would be probably relevant and helpful. So I'm calling it the chaos series. So this is the first part of it. And the title of this is Finding Joy and Meaning in a Pandemic, and especially exploring the role of emotional intelligence. Is that even possible right now? Is it even possible to find joy and meaning? Is that too frivolous? All these things that I think comes to our mind sometimes when we think about what are we supposed to be doing right now. So I'm going to kick it off. Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself? You got some really cool background, a really good story. So why don't you go for it?
Sure. Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm honored to be a part of this. So my background, as I always share, I got my start leading wilderness trips for chemically dependent teens. I would be hiking the North Cascade Mountains, trying to help teenagers deal with sobriety in a natural environment through natural consequences. And I do primarily corporate work. And I always say that oddly, it set me up for corporate work in a way I never thought it would. I'm drawing on those learnings daily. My advanced degree was in applied behavioral science. So it was really about looking at how do people change behavior in relationship to be more effective. I was a marriage and family therapist in private practice when I first came out of graduate school. Did that for a while, and then I just didn't like working alone so much. I actually enjoyed having colleagues and teammates that I could bounce things off of, so I pretty quickly moved from that into corporate training, leadership development, and have been doing that since. We're probably looking at 22, 23 years now. I spend the bulk of my time helping leaders be more effective, delivering trainings on emotional intelligence, on effective teaming. We have a challenge course, a ropes course at the northeast end of Lake Washington, where we, prior to the pandemic, would put people in ropes and harnesses and get them 40 feet in the air and see if they can get along with each other. And then I teach at Seattle University. We teach and incubate a lot of our courses for MBA students at Seattle U. And probably the bulk of my time is stepping in and coaching and helping people get back into partnership when they've been kind of knocked out of partnership.
What does that mean?
Being knocked out of partnership?
Like when you talk about like people being in conflict and getting them back to partnership. So do you have like a specific story? Because you always have good stories. So
yeah, before I'd say a story, I'd say that I think, first of all, I should tell you that I believe in conflict. I think conflict is actually a very healthy part of relationship. It's a super healthy part of teaming in general. And, I float around, I work with a lot of different organizations. And the buzzwords right now that you hear in almost every organization are diversity and equity. And what I continue to find when I step into these organizations is that a lot of people who are embracing those things, which I firmly believe in, are conflict avoidant, conflict averse. So they're not really stepping in and having some of these tougher conversations that are really, really necessary to get the best and the most out of people. So when I talk about partnership, it's not a kumbaya partnership. It's being mutually committed to the same goal. And if we are mutually committed, it allows us to be a little more messy, a little more scrappy in the relationship. My wife and I have often talked about that in our marriage years ago. We talked about what our commitment meant. We were sitting in a restaurant, and there were a salt and pepper shaker and this packet of sugar things. And we started talking about the relationship, and we said that, our relationship is actually the sugar packets. It's separate from she and I, who were the salt and pepper shakers. What we realize is that the emotions can go up and down and all over the place in our relationship. You can be madly in love one day and incredibly angry the next. But what really makes a difference is both of us being mutually committed to maintaining the relationship, which stands outside of us. And so when I work with teams and organizations, that's what I'm focusing on. I want people to be able to be messy but stay committed.
Yeah. How do you think that applies now? So the way I'm thinking about it is when we first met during the pandemic, maybe not when we first met during the pandemic. It's more that when this started becoming a thing, and people were starting to cancel events, and it's, there were signs that, oh my gosh, we might go into some kind of quarantine, right?
Yep.
I remember I was having lunch and you were saying, things were being canceled for you. And, because your style of coaching and training is very dynamic. It's very in-person. And so we start to see a lot of the live stuff, in-person stuff being postponed, canceled. And at the same time, I just thought to myself, man, isn't this like the time to actually think about how we should be showing up? And I don't want to go back. I don't really want to go to the topic of like, what's the value of learning and leadership right now? Because I think as L&D people, we always kind of gravitate towards that business case, but it's more about that topic of, that staying in relationship with people. You've seen a lot of couples are fighting more or finding those things they don't like each other. You hear these stories now because they're together all the time and they can't really do anything. There's no escape. So like, how do you find that level of partnership today? And don't you need more of that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the first thing that I became aware of when all this went down. So you talked about, all of our trainings are, highly experiential. People are out of their seats. We're engaging them. That's just always the way we've taught. And that's, I think, been kind of a key to our success. And within 2 days, 80% of our business just dropped off the books. I mean, just like that. And we still do a lot of coaching. It's kind of morphed and changed now. We're doing that stuff online. But I think the biggest thing I noticed was reactivity, right? What happens when people are suddenly, when they're faced with huge change, and it doesn't have to happen at work. It could happen anywhere in life. You could lose someone close to you, or a pandemic, and suddenly you're stuck at home. Our tendency, the brain is designed to get us safe, and the amygdala kicks in. It gets emotionally hijacked, right? And we start just kind of flailing, and I saw everybody doing that, including myself. What are we going to do? Trying to come up with new ways to fix the problem. And I think when you really talk about emotional intelligence and the chaos that we're in right now, it's about the ability to sit still. And I don't think a lot of us are good at it. I don't think a lot of us like it. When we sit still, emotion comes up. There's feelings that we don't want to sit with. And I think socially, we're kind of designed to pop out of our emotions quickly, get quick fixes. Yeah. And I think the quarantine and pandemic definitely makes us have to sit with those feelings. And some of those feelings, to your point, are loneliness, isolation, needing connection, fear. What do I do with that? So I think really the core of emotional intelligence is needed more now than it's ever been.
Yeah, I think so too. I often think to myself how, I guess, quote unquote, lucky I am that my husband's still an essential employee, so he's not home every day during the day.
Yeah, you're lucky because he's gone. That's awesome.
Well, okay, this sounds funny, but I'm just thinking about couples who are with each other a lot.
Yeah.
And then I'm thinking about, okay, if you're in an urban setting where most people are in apartments, right? There's only so much physical division or distance you can put between each other to create that me time.
Right.
So, I have empathy for them. And this is not to say that, I hate having my husband around, but it's just this idea that that I need some time to just be around me and not have other people's energy around. So, in some ways, it's really tough. And oftentimes I think people point to the hierarchy of needs from Maslow.
That's for sure.
And oftentimes I also think about how people tend to be a little more short-sighted with that hierarchy, because we think, well, the basic survival needs need to be taken care of before we move on to some of the higher needs, like fulfillment and happiness and finding partnership or whatever. But then there have been later opinions from scientists who say, actually, it's not necessarily a sequential, process of life.
I'd agree.
Somebody who can barely, survive doesn't mean that they don't need those other things too.
Absolutely.
Right? So just because we're in a situation now where many people may be thinking about how am I going to, pay my bills, how am I going to feed myself, feed my family, it doesn't mean that their needs for connection is any less than before. And kind of like what you're saying, the brain automatically goes to survival. So yeah, maybe our priorities there, but at the same time, it's, it doesn't mean that our needs for those other things go away.
Yeah. Well, I think when you go up the pyramid, Maslow's pyramid, to self-actualization and those higher levels, if you think about that, that's really about awareness. And I actually love the new thinking around that, we can be in the most dire consequences where I'm facing, grief or loss. I mean, I go back to recently, and I think I've told you this, I lost a close friend about 2.5 years ago, and she drowned unexpectedly, very close. And we were super close to her family, and they had 4 kids. And it immediately threw us into a state of chaos. You're reactive. But to be able to stay present in that moment, even though you're scrambling and you're trying to do things. First of all, I think we have to realize, and people are doing that in the pandemic, they're scrambling to fix it. But who knows how to fix it? I mean, at the end of the day, how many people alive today have been through a pandemic? I mean, we're trying to throw solutions at something we've never experienced before. So first, just to admit to ourselves that I don't know what to do here. What that does is, sure, I have to keep putting one foot in front of the other and doing what I need to do to get better if I'm needing food or I'm needing shelter. But it doesn't mean that I can't also slow down and not react and be more present to what's going on around me. And that's more the self-actualization. That's more of that awareness. So I think they both have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Reacting makes things worse a lot of the time.
Yeah, I can personally attest to that, because I feel like this conversation is coming either at a really good time or a really bad time. Just because yesterday, as I was trying to get my head straight to preparing for this and, all the things I want to build for my practice, right now, I'm just calling it practice because, I'm not making money yet. It's not a real business yet. So I'm trying to think about, what's all the content I'm going to create. I want to create a schedule. I want to create all these topics. So I'm in a mode of like, let's go, let's move. And then something happened yesterday morning where there was either some possible systems glitch or some kind of error. So, my unemployment check claim, whatever, didn't go through. And in that moment, it was like everything shut down for me.
Yeah.
I mean, everything shut down in a sense, like I couldn't hold a normal conversation. Every conversation I was in was very distracting. I physically felt myself like I was drowning.
Yeah.
And the analogy I would come up with is, it's like if I was treading water and then I was holding onto a balloon as kind of like my survival, but I was also holding like a lifeline. And then all of a sudden something happened and I just saw the lifeline float away. And all I have is this temporary balloon that's going to pop any moment. That's kind of how I felt yesterday. And I just felt everything shutting down.
Yeah.
And I just thought, and then today, I'm at a much calmer space, mentally, emotionally. But at the same time, I decided to not like just get on with it. Kind of like what you're saying with being still and pausing. I could have been more productive today. Like I could have drafted more of my content, could have done more creation, whatever. Yeah. But I didn't, because there's such a thing as emotional burnout. And I felt like it's important to respond and also listen to what I'm going through. Yeah. And just kind of letting that be for now.
Yeah, I once had a coach or a sponsor. I'm in recovery, recovering from addiction, have been for years and years. And I had a sponsor once say to me that I thought was powerful. He said, Kevin, you've learned how to work your way through, continue working through a nervous breakdown. So, when you hit that wall, and it's hard to hear that. That must have been devastating to see that and how, the fear that comes up and the uncertainty.
Yeah.
But what I like that you said is that it's really a tenet of emotional intelligence, is your ability to sit there and watch the emotion go through you, right? To actually watch the feelings just kind of do what they do without having to suddenly react to them, have those feelings drive your behavior. I mean, you could have easily gotten up, okay, panic, get moving, get moving. But at the end of the day, two things. One, is it really going to help? If we haven't done thoughtful, if we really haven't thought through what our next step should be, just because you're moving doesn't mean you're going to be making any progress.
Yeah.
Just be burning your energy out. The other thing is it doesn't honor the grief. It doesn't honor the sadness. And I think that one thing I'm realizing in this, I'm still coaching a lot of people, and probably the biggest thing that I do in my coaching sessions is just have people slow down and acknowledge some of those feelings they're going through. That this is sad, this is scary, there's grief. Just to be able to have someone reflect it back, see it, hear it. We didn't do anything. We just connected. And, empathy, that sort of empathy comes out of a type of psychology called humanistic psychology, where if people are listened to effectively, they actually become empowered and then can kind of dust themselves off when they're ready and start taking action. And notice what I just said, when they're ready. Yeah. I think we try to jump in too fast often. Mm-hmm. So just hearing people, and you had mentioned prior to this, the concept of joy.
Yeah.
And I thought about that a little bit. And it's funny, for me, joy now, it's changed. I think when I was younger, joy used to be about more thrill seeking. Riding a roller coaster is joyful, right? All those happy moments. But through recovery, through different things, what I've realized for me now, joy is about acceptance, about being still, about being present. And in that, the beauty of that is when I'm truly still and present for whatever's going on. And again, that could be sadness and fear and grief and loss. There's still joy in that. Be able to sit still and just be a part of it and feel it.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, the thing I keep thinking about is, reactiveness. Kind of what we were saying earlier. Like, if you talk to Tracy, she's going to be on episode 2. If you talk to her, she'll probably be like, yeah, Wendy was reactive because I was panic texting Tracy.
With all people, she knows reactivity. It's great.
And, you're right. There's so many things I mentally went to. I was thinking, oh my gosh, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? And then as I was researching all those, different things, I'm finding that none of them were productive. None of them were actually helping me.
Yeah.
So, and at the same time, I don't want people who are listening to this to think that I'm saying that when there's something bad happening, you shouldn't act with urgency.
That's right.
However, in situations where I think there's a lot of things where the key thing here for me is that there was a huge unknown. Mm-hmm. So yes, it could be a potential problem, but there's a huge unknown because I don't know any information. So in the absence of information, which I think a lot of people are just calling uncertainty, just acting is not always helpful.
That's right. Well, I mean, I always go back, and you've heard me share this before in front of groups, the first aid example. Those of us who have taken first aid, the very first step in first aid, I would say you're driving down the road, there's an accident in front of you, you're the first one to pull over. It's a bad one. There's people actually out on the ground, laying on the ground. Yeah. What's the very first thing you're supposed to do? And people say things like, well, call 911 or run over and make sure they're breathing. But actually, the very first step in first aid is assess the situation. Slow down for a minute, take a pause, because there could be a car coming, power line down. They found that a lot of people who would go to rescue others would get hurt themselves or injured themselves because they didn't slow down. So just acting is not always the best way to go. And I see this now. It's funny. I think you had also mentioned that right now you hear all sorts of advice and solutions about what we're supposed to be doing. Yeah. And again, I'll go back to the idea, first of all, who's the expert on this? How do we, who knows? Yeah. And the people that are offering solutions, a lot of them are managing their own anxiety, trying to believe that they actually, if I can just come up with a solution and talk with confidence, we'll be okay. But not necessarily, right? I mean, we're going to find our way through this. But part of that is by letting go. We need more information. It's coming. Can we sit still while we get more information and make good decisions?
Yeah. I mean, that's good. It feels like that's good advice, and that's the good thing to do. At the same time, I'm thinking about there also seems to be a level of pressure and stress of how you're supposed to be right now.
Because you said that before. What does that look like?
Well, so, I mean, this is probably biased because of the type of, information that's available to me and the kind of things I read. Yeah. I'm on social media a lot. So these are the things that, are, for better or worse, they're crowdsourced information being passed around. Yeah. You either have like the really funny side where, people are saying, this is the chance is not the chance, but people are doing things like they're being couch potatoes, they're, binging through Netflix, they're eating whatever they want. It's, all sorts of things that you can imagine. And, the fact, there's jokes being made about, how liquor stores are essential and people are drinking so much and they're just coming up with all these creative ways to make food and make different drinks. And then you have the other side, which is the more serious side. They're reminding people, don't be selfish, stay at home. This is what you need to do. And when you're out, this is what you need to do. And don't do this, don't do that. So in either case, with either side, it almost seems like they're just like, I don't know, some kind of opposing energy around, where one is saying, yeah, it's a pandemic, just do whatever, like just completely let go. And then there's the other part where it's like, well, no, you need to be really responsible right now.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's that pressure of like, oh, wait, I'm supposed to be a good citizen. I'm supposed to be a good person. I'm supposed to exemplify this and that. And then there's the other part where it's like, well, no, it's a pandemic. You're in quarantine. So let yourself, just not wear pants for 3 days and not wash up or whatever. So like, how do we reconcile those two when we're talking about, slowing down and letting go in the emotional intelligence sense? Like, how do you reconcile the two?
Well, again, so as I said, some people are going to solutions to manage their own anxiety. Some people are looking for solutions to manage their own anxiety. Some of us are hoping that someone's going to come along and give us there is a right way to do it. Well, obviously, we should just take this time, sit down and enjoy, relax finally, or go, panic, get moving now. I've had some people say to me, Kevin, right now, this is the prime time for business opportunity. You got to get ahead of the curve. You got to be the first one in the market. And I got to tell you, everything in me is just like, I have no desire to do that. I don't want to jump in and start. So part of it, I think we're so used to looking externally, listening to that internal voice. And I think where some of these people come from, you're talking about two opposing kind of views on it. Where they're coming from has a lot to do with the patterns they had growing up around how anxiety was managed. It also has a lot to do with the context of where they're sitting in their life right now. There was all this stuff. I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger and some different people put some things out about social distancing. And of course, he's sitting in his hot tub with his little house pony. He has a horse in his house. In that context, it's pretty easy to talk about relaxing. But there's some people out there right now. We have people protesting that are, storming the Capitol saying, hey, we got to go back to work. That's enough. And I've seen a lot of judgment towards those people. But the reality is, look, if you're looking for your next paycheck, your family is looking at you to provide. So, I think it makes sense, right? So having empathy for wherever anybody is the first part of it. But really coming back again to, what does your gut say? We're so not used to slowing down and paying attention to that inner voice. I've personally in this thing, it's been really important for me. I've been looking for a sabbatical. I feel like I've been going straight for like 15, 20 years in this business. And I never seem to have that time. It's like there's always one thing, the next thing, raising children, all of that. And even though this is scary, it's given me a bit of that time, whether I like it or not, to slow down and just think. And part of my gut tells me that's where I need to be right now. I don't know where things are going to go. There are some scary things out there, but today, right now, what's most important for me is to be on a podcast with you and talk. I just know that this is the right place to be. I don't think I'm going to make millions from this, Wendy, and I'm okay with that.
No, I'm super grateful, and I really appreciate you being here. But to play the devil's advocate, right? Someone could look at you and say, "Well, Kevin, it's you've had a successful career, so maybe you can afford to just slow down and think, listen to your gut and all that."
Yeah.
So, how would you respond to that? I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, I just love hearing you say I've had a successful career. I'd have to look and think if I've actually had that. That's interesting. I don't always feel that way. I guess that part of that is again, we don't really understand until we've been in someone else's shoes how they're seeing the world and what it's like. I think some people, they may look at me and say that, and there's a part of me that's always feeling like I could lose everything I have at any moment. I always feel that way when I'm in front of groups, delivering trainings, coaching. I always ask people if I look like I'm afraid while I'm doing that. And I'm always nervous. I'm nervous now. Fear of saying the wrong thing, doing the wrong thing, and holding on so tightly to what I've accumulated and what I have in my life. So I'd start by saying that that, yeah, internally for me, I don't feel relaxed in that way. I think I might face some of those things other people are facing. But I mean, I don't know what I would say. Ask the question again. I kind of got derailed. What's the actual question?
So, it was just basically how you would respond to somebody, maybe critiquing you and saying, how, I guess the larger question would be, they might say, well, how can I slow down? Like,
Yeah.
if you're being empathetic to their situation, they need that paycheck and they really need those survival things.
Yeah.
How can they slow down and listen to what their needs are? Like,
Yeah,
maybe you can.
No, that's a great question, because what I'll say, regardless of your situation, we can slow down, right? There's a great saying: if you find yourself walking through hell, keep walking, right? You said it earlier, the idea of kind of slothing. Well, I'm just going to relax and kick back and wait. There's danger in that too. I think that regardless of where you are, what current circumstances you have, how much money you have, how safe you feel, we all need to keep putting one foot in front of the other, for sure. But how we do that makes all the difference, right? I can panic and put one foot in front of the other. I can stay in a panicked state of mind. Or I can continue, and I'll say this, continue to slow myself down and let go, get into acceptance, get real about what I really can control here. I think we fool ourselves into thinking that we're controlling a lot more than we are.
Yeah.
So regardless of where you are, surrendering again and again. And for me, on a daily basis, that it's not like I wake up and I'm just surrendered and joyful and everything. I mean, I pick up control every 10 minutes, every half an hour. I start controlling the world again. It's my brain is wired to do it. So can I develop a discipline when that happens, slowing down, regardless of what my path is, and taking intentional, slow steps?
Yeah.
I think it applies to anybody and everybody wherever you are.
I like that you talked about control, because I think that's one of the first things I started noticing about myself when we all went into quarantine and then I got laid off, is the idea and the sense of things, like you said, the things that you thought you had control over are all of a sudden just yanked away from you.
Yep.
Kind of like that balloon lifesaver, right? It's going to pop any minute. And while you have it, you might think you're in control, So it pops, you don't have it. And then what are you going to do? And so when, all the chaos started happening, one of the first things I noticed about myself was that I started scanning in my mind. I started scanning everything in my life that I can regain control of.
Yeah.
I was thinking, where can I start being a more active agent in? Whether it's about finances, budgeting, whether it's about, what's going on in just the physical things inside the house. Can I do some yard work? Things that I would never do. I hate yard work, by the way. I know, and I planted shrubs. That's how much of a control seeker I am.
And it only took a pandemic to get you to do it.
Yeah, right. And unfortunately, not all of them are surviving, I think. So, but that's for another podcast.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that I noticed was, other than the control piece, I feel like it's almost like two sides of like the same page. It's like on one side, it's like, what can I take control of? And then on the other side, it was, oh, here are the things that actually really matter to me.
Yep.
And I'll just say this, that even though the situation, the act of being laid off is not fun, I feel like I was lucky enough to be in a place in life where I felt like, you know what, this is not the worst thing to have happened to me.
Yeah.
And then I can re-examine what are some things that I truly value that I need more of in my life. And that's not to say that I didn't value my job or I don't value my career, but it's also reminding me what are some things that are fleeting that I can say, you know what, it's okay. But what are some things that for me are the non-negotiables? Like if my husband got hurt, that would be, I probably would not be dealing with it like I dealt with my job. So it just kind of also gave me a reflection of, okay, here's some things you really care about in life. Why don't you do more of those?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, when you're talking, people are very resilient. Is, you find people that go through loss, and, I've had some people very close to me who have lost a lot. And it's amazing to me how, when you trim it all down, what they can really anchor to is important. I mean, Sandy, my wife and I talk about this sometimes too. What if we lost everything? I mean, everything. Lost the home, lost, what could we really survive on? And there's a real freedom in that. I'm reminded all the time, you hear it all the time, that what we own owns us. And I think I subtly, just like everybody else, start building up things around me, possessions. I build up ego, successful career, I mean, all these great things. And I don't realize how attached I really become to them. They become my identity.
Yeah.
And this, at least for me, this gives me a chance to look at that. What if it all left tomorrow? What would I be left with? Well, I'd be left with the people that I love. Yeah. I'd be left with, simple things that I enjoy doing. Taekwondo. I was just talking to my Taekwondo master yesterday about that we have that no matter what. You can do that anywhere. These are important things for me. So yeah, the essentials.
Yeah.
None of us want to lose it though. It's like shedding layers. It's painful. And I get that, but yeah.
Yeah, actually, as you're talking about the attachment piece, I feel like we're almost kind of going down the idea of some Buddhist philosophy.
Yeah.
So, long time ago, I had a religious studies minor when I was going to college, and I focused on Buddhism. It's a very fascinating academic topic. So I never practiced as a practitioner, but I found it from the academic perspective really interesting. And one of the main teachings, or really at the heart of Buddhism, is this idea that everything is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
That one of the key things that lead us to suffer is attachment. That's and right. So, the idea that the Buddha, just shed everything in his life to look for enlightenment was this whole idea that everything that you're attached to are the reasons that you suffer. Yeah. And so if you want enlightenment, you get rid of all your attachments. Now that's really extreme for a lot of people, especially today. We're so attached to just the way of life. At the same time, kind of like what you're saying, now that we're cut off from like at least a consumer world, we can still be happy. Life can still be meaningful. We didn't need a lot of those things, right? In fact, I think all the things that people talk about missing really are the people connection points.
Yeah. Well, I think that, you said a lot of things that ring true for me. I think that what you said about Maslow's hierarchy earlier, this belief, and it's a pretty arrogant belief, I think, that was started, was that, well, unless you have all your basic needs and you're not poor and everything's okay, then you can self-actualize. Yeah. I mean, I believe that some people who are struggling with some of those basic needs may be happier than I am. Yeah. They have more connection. They I have a colleague at Seattle U who said that maybe loneliness is the epidemic of the 21st century, that people really struggle. We're isolated, we're alone, we're disconnected. And so maybe people are finding those roots. The other thing I'd say when you were talking, I talked earlier about that internal compass. I like that you brought up kind of Buddhism and the great truth that life is suffering. And once we transcend that, life becomes more livable in a lot of ways. For me, I had a moment about when I started to really figure out what joy was for me. I was thinking about this because you had posed that question to me prior to this. And I thought about it, and it was subtle, but I was actually in a tent out camping, and I was reading the 12 and 12 from AA. And as I was reading it, I read something that finally clicked, and I don't know why it clicked, but basically it was that I had to quit playing God. And I'm not a religious person, but the idea is I wake up and I go into hyper control, like I'm controlling everything. And what this basically said was that, happiness was really based on my ability to put my will in line with a higher power's will. Somewhere along the way, I had to get out of the way. So that internal compass for me is no longer trying to constantly get everything to change in my life to fit what I need. It's trying to slow down and listen, and be guided by whatever that is, intuition, an internal voice. You may see it as God or as Buddha or whatever it is, but getting out of the way as quick as I can and surrendering. And the truth is that, again, I can talk great on this podcast. That's all you need to do. But I mean, easily 20 times a day, I go into compulsive control again. So it's really about letting go and being guided. And that's why I like this podcast. That's why I'm here with you. I didn't control this. I'm excited I get to be here. There's a reason that you and I are supposed to be talking right now, even if no one ever hears this. At least you and I get to connect.
Yeah, right? Exactly. And I think that's really the true nature and purpose of the podcast. It wasn't that I wanted to have artificial conversations for other people. I love having good conversations with people I respect and admire and enjoy being around. And I think people need to listen to some of the things we say, because I think some of the things that we talked about, sometimes they're funny, but sometimes I think they're also really, they're helpful for me. And I at least hope that they're helpful for someone else.
Yeah, me too. Well, and as far as meaning, I think when you had talked originally about doing this podcast, you said joy and meaning.
Yeah.
Think about for me what meaning is, and it's exactly what you just said. It's living my life as honestly and transparently as I can with people around me. And if that somehow helps someone else feel less isolated, they get something from that. That's really what it is. It's not usually, some of the best work I've ever done isn't when I'm getting paid. It's when I'm having coffee with somebody, and it's not me doing it. It's just me being in acceptance, surrendering, being open to what's coming, and kind of listening to intuition.
Yeah.
So I'm happy you're doing this. I think it's the right thing to do. I mean,
thank you.
Yeah.
So are you telling people then that you're just going to be doing free work from now on?
No, I'm just doing free work. No, I won't say that. I do like money too. Money is important.
Yeah.
You gotta live.
Well, I think we're going to come up on time in a couple minutes. So for people who are listening, watching, and they're still grappling with this idea of maybe they're for themselves individually, or they're trying to help their family, or maybe there's somebody like an HR professional who's trying to help the organization.
Yeah.
What's your call of action to them, or what's the thing that you would advise them to just start thinking about, start doing?
Start with self. Start with self, because again, we're always going to be prone to want to go out and try to fix everyone around us. I have 2 kids in the house, and it's really easy to get into this mode of I've got to fix them. They're struggling, and it's my job, and that's 2 things. One is that obviously it's a good gesture. We care about people. We want to do that, but it's also a way to get out of our own emotion and feeling. We're just back into a reactive mode. So I always say start with self. I always say start with self. Get some support and help yourself. Same thing like the first aid thing. Make sure that you're taken care of and you're modeling what you're trying to help others with first.
Yeah.
And I could say a lot more, but I think I just end it with that, because I don't want, that's enough.
Yeah.
When I'm coaching people, and that's why people are calling, and that's why I'm helping leaders, is they're saying all my people are struggling. I can't tell you how many times those conversations quickly turn to, hey, how are you doing? What are you feeling? What do you need? And then you hear people I've had people break down. A lot of tears through this, where people are just saying, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. And sometimes it's more with what they're dealing with at home than work. But then when they get to that better place, they're more present for the people around them.
That's great. So how do you want people to get connected with you?
If I can support them, they can just reach out directly, just Kevin at teamsandleaders.com, and I'll make sure you have that information. You can certainly shoot me an email if you have any questions.
Okay.
You'll have my phone number there. And then you can also go to, my primary work is through Teams and Leaders, which is that organization I was talking about. You can go to our website and get info. But what you said, like I said, I don't want this to be a marketing thing. It's great if you want to reach out to me, but people just need to talk right now. And so I'm here if someone wants to talk.
No, I really appreciate that. And I think your background in counseling really kind of shows up sometimes. And I feel like that's almost like the perfect element in your coaching. It's very addicting to talk to you. So, yeah.
For worse, yeah. Well, I'm excited. If you're having Tracy on the next one, Tracy is dynamic and amazing, and I've known her for about 20 years, and talk about a wealth of resource in that.
Yeah, she's amazing. So for those of you who are watching, listening, part 2 of the Chaos series coming out, I would say next week or so, will be with Dr. Tracy Adams on the topic of getting what you want, even today. So thank you all for watching and listening. Make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you are alerted when the next episode comes out. And Kevin's email is on the screen, and so is my contact information. And stay tuned. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.